The chandeliers at Mar-a-Lago trembled, their crystals catching the light as they swayed with the force of the president's fury. The opulent silence of the estate was shattered by the echo of raised voices and the unmistakable sound of anger reverberating through gilded halls. Former President Donald Trump erupted in a fit of rage, his face flushed and his gestures sharp as he learned of the latest affront to his administration. News had just broken. British Columbia was proposing tolls on American vehicles traveling to and from Alaska. It was a bold and unexpected move, a direct response to the tariffs Trump had imposed on Canadian goods just days before. The headlines flashed across every screen in the room, each one stoking the fire of his indignation. Trump saw this not just as a policy dispute, but as a personal insult, a calculated challenge to his authority and to America's dominance on the continent. The idea that a neighbor, an ally, would dare to retaliate so openly was almost unthinkable to him. Pacing the ornate room, his footsteps echoing off marble floors, he denounced Canada's move as an attack on the United States, a blockade of Alaska, and a betrayal of the long-standing friendship between the two nations. He muttered about loyalty, about respect, about the cost of defiance. The idea that Canada would leverage its geography, its control over the only land route to Alaska, against him was infuriating. It was a strategic play he hadn't anticipated, and it stung all the more for its simplicity. His advisors scrambled to offer solutions, their voices overlapping in a frantic attempt to calm the situation. Some urged restraint, others suggested countermeasures, but Trump dismissed them all, demanding a show of strength that would remind Canada, and the world, who was in charge. The Alaska Highway, America's vital lifeline to its 49th state, suddenly became a bargaining chip in a high-stakes standoff. The road, winding through thousands of miles of wilderness, now symbolized the fragile link between two powerful nations. Trump had expected Canada to fold under economic pressure, to back down quietly in the face of American might. Instead, he was met with a response that was both precise and deeply personal, a move that caught him and his team completely off guard. Instead, the Canadians had found a vulnerability he hadn't anticipated, using their unique position to turn the tables and force a confrontation on their own terms. The border, once a symbol of cooperation, now bristled with tension. The stage was set for a dramatic escalation, threatening to unravel decades of peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. The world watched as two allies teetered on the brink of a diplomatic crisis, their leaders locked in a battle of wills. The fury at Mar-a-Lago signaled a bitter confrontation ahead, one that would test not only the resolve of a president, but the strength of a relationship that had long been taken for granted. The conflict began in early March 2025, when Trump announced sweeping 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. He framed it as protecting American industries and rebalancing an unfair trade relationship. Canadian leaders, including Prime Minister Trudeau, condemned the move, warning of economic pain on both sides. Despite warnings, Trump pressed forward, confident America could outlast Canada in a trade war. But the tariffs were seen in Canada as bullying, igniting a passionate defense of national pride. BC Premier David Eby called it economic war, setting the stage for a targeted retaliation, the Alaska Highway toll. On March 17, 2025, British Columbia unveiled its counterstrike, a bold and calculated response to mounting U.S. trade pressure that had been building for months. The province's leadership, under intense scrutiny from both the public and the media, stepped into the spotlight with a plan that would reverberate far beyond Canada's borders. The centerpiece of this response was the Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act, a legislative tool crafted with precision to give British Columbia new powers in the ongoing dispute. For the first time, the bill authorized BC to impose tolls on all vehicles using its highways to reach Alaska. This was not just a symbolic gesture, it directly targeted a unique American vulnerability, since the Alaska Highway is the only reliable land route connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States. The legislation didn't impose tolls immediately, but it established a robust legal framework, giving BC significant leverage in any future negotiations with Washington. Lawmakers debated fiercely, aware of the stakes for both economies. With a sunset clause built in, the act was designed as a temporary but potent threat, one that could be activated or withdrawn depending on the progress of talks. The clock was now ticking for a diplomatic solution. The Alaska Highway is vital for time-sensitive goods. Fresh produce, medical supplies, and oil equipment all depend on this route. Any disruption would have immediate and far-reaching consequences for Alaskan communities and businesses. BC's move was a classic asymmetric strategy, leveraging its unique geography to punch above its weight in the economic standoff. Behind closed doors, strategists pored over maps and scenarios, weighing every possible outcome. By threatening to use its control over this critical corridor, British Columbia was using the land itself as a bargaining chip, turning mountains and highways into tools of economic power. Premier David Eby framed the act as a necessary defense against what he called U.S. economic aggression, emphasizing that British Columbia would not stand idly by while its interests were threatened. The bill's announcement sent shockwaves through both countries. Observers were stunned by the boldness of the move, which signaled that Canada would not be a passive victim in the escalating trade conflict. The threat of a toll quickly became a symbol of Canadian resolve and unity, rallying public support and drawing international attention to the dispute. But with cross-border cooperation now at risk, the stakes had never been higher for both sides of the border. For Premier Eby, the toll threat was about defending Canadian sovereignty. He argued Trump's tariffs were an existential threat, and BC's response was a shield, not a provocation. By framing the dispute as self-defense, Eby rallied public support and unified British Columbians. The Alaska Highway was the perfect leverage point, forcing the U.S. to confront the consequences of its actions. Ottawa's response was seen as too cautious, so BC took bold action. Standing up to the U.S. played well domestically, boosting Eby's political standing. The message was clear: Canada would not be bullied. A targeted proportional response was necessary to protect national interests. For Alaskans, BC's toll threat was an immediate crisis. The Alaska Highway is essential for high-value, perishable, and time-sensitive goods. The prospect of tolls meant higher prices, empty shelves, and delays for vital supplies. The Alaska Trucking Association warned of severe disruptions. Governor Mike Dunleavy urged both governments to find a diplomatic solution, emphasizing Alaskans were caught in the crossfire. State leaders expressed frustration and vulnerability as decisions made far away threatened their livelihoods. The dispute shattered the assumption of free passage through Canada. Alaska's economic security was now tied to the health of U.S. Canada relations. Anxiety spread as residents hoped for a resolution before their lifeline was severed. In response, U.S. and Alaskan officials sought leverage of their own. They were determined to find a way to counteract the economic pressure being applied by British Columbia. They targeted BC's cruise ship industry, proposing a permanent waiver of the Passenger Vessel Services Act, PVSA. This act, which mandates foreign-flagged ships to stop at a foreign port when traveling between U.S. ports, was a critical point of leverage. This would let cruise ships sail directly from Seattle to Alaska, bypassing Canadian ports like Vancouver and Victoria. Such a move would significantly alter the cruise industry's dynamics, shifting the flow of tourism dollars. The economic impact on BC would be devastating. Millions in lost tourism revenue. Local businesses, dependent on the influx of cruise passengers, would face severe financial strain. Senator Dan Sullivan led the charge, arguing the U.S. was justified in retaliating if Canada weaponized its geography. He emphasized the need to protect American economic interests. The cruise ship gambit mirrored BC's strategy, targeting a key vulnerability. By focusing on the cruise industry, the U.S. aimed to hit Canada where it hurt economically. The threat intensified the conflict, drawing another major industry into the fray. Tourism executives and industry leaders scrambled to respond to the escalating situation. Cruise lines and tourism operators watched anxiously as the standoff escalated. The uncertainty created a ripple effect, causing widespread concern across the industry. The integrated North American economy was now a battleground. The interconnectedness of the two nations' economies meant that any disruption could have far-reaching consequences. Both sides held powerful economic weapons, and the stakes had never been higher. The outcome of this standoff would shape the future of cross-border economic relations. The dispute quickly spread beyond BC as other provinces joined the fight. Ontario imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., raising costs for states like New York and Michigan. Premier Doug Ford framed it as national unity and economic self-defense. Yukon halted purchases from American companies and restricted U.S. access to government contracts. Residents called for even harsher measures, reflecting growing anger. Even small regions were willing to endure hardship out of principle. The conflict was no longer regional, it was now a nationwide Canadian response. Public sentiment hardened, poisoning cross-border relations. The economic consequences for the U.S. were becoming widespread. The trade war's real impact was felt by ordinary people. In Alaska, families worried about rising grocery costs and supply shortages. Small businesses faced uncertainty and potential ruin. In BC, the threat to the cruise industry endangered thousands of jobs. The conflict frayed personal and cultural ties along the border, replacing trust with suspicion. Cross-border communities felt the chill as movement and commerce slowed. The human cost was measured in anxiety and economic pain. A truck driver in Alberta, a family in Michigan, a shopkeeper in Victoria, all faced hardship. While leaders traded threats, citizens bore the burden. The dispute was spiraling, with no end in sight. As of October 2025, the standoff drags on, casting a shadow over U.S. Canada relations. The conflict has become a fundamental test of the alliance, introducing hostility not seen in generations. Trust has been damaged, and the prospect of returning to friendly cooperation seems remote. Both nations are rethinking economic integration, now seen as a strategic risk. Nationalist sentiments make compromise harder, and political animosity poisons diplomacy. The breakdown threatens cooperation on defense, environment, and more. Even if resolved, the scars will remain. A precedent has been set. The knowledge of each side's willingness to weaponize geography and regulation cannot be unlearned. The special relationship has been tested before, but this time, the damage may be lasting.